Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Online Smicha. Many times, especially in camps or in schools or in public places, they have posters that they hang of psukim, etc. Sometimes they actually paint the words of the psukim on the wall. And we know what halacha tells us how important it is, the oisius of a pasuk. We know about shemus, how shemus have to be buried, and the special kedusha, the special treatment we do to psukim of the Torah. And the question will be, if somebody had words of Torah painted on a wall, and things could happen, and you want to change the color of the wall, you want to paint, may you just paint right over the pasuk that's painted on the wall, or would that be a shaila? Especially if there is Hashem's name in one of the psukim, it definitely is a pasuk. But if it has a reference to Hashem or Hashem's name, would it be a shaila if you paint over it? Would that be considered erasing chas v'sholem, a pasuk in the Torah, which we know that it's something which is prohibited? So this is an interesting shaila, and this is brought in the Achronim. And they quote the pasuk in Parshas Kisavai. The Parshas Kisavai says that when you come be'ever ayarden, v'akimoisalacha avonim gedolos, you should make big stones, v'sadata oisam basid, and you put plaster on these big stones, v'chasafta aleim es kol divrei haTorah zois. On those stones, you write out the words of the Torah. This is the statement, the phrase of the pasuk, that you find these big stones, and Rashi discusses which stones, and it's a whole Gemara and Saita, what type of stones, and you put plaster over it. This, in the order of the Torah, it says you put plaster over it, and then you write the chafta es kol divrei Torah zois. However, when you look in the Gemara and Saita, the Gemara says, Taner Rabbanan, Gemara Saita, Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Taner Rabbanan, Keitzad Kasvu Yisrael as Torah. How did the Yidden fulfill this commandment of writing the Torah on the stones? Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, Agabe Avanim Kasvu. Rabbi Yehuda said they wrote it on the stones. Shenema v'chasafta al avanim, v'achakach. After they wrote the Torah on it, they put plaster over it. So it seems to be that to paint or plaster over psukim of the Torah shouldn't be a problem. Why? Because mechika, erasing, taking a pasuk or taking a chas v'sholem Hashem's name and erasing it, that's prohibited. By just covering it over with a layer of paint, that's not necessarily the isser, the transgression of mechika, of erasing. That's just sort of a cover. This raya was brought in Shilas Teshuvas Panim Me'iris. He was asked this question, if a shul has words of Torah, if you could paint over it. And he brings this as a raya. If the Torah says that that's how it should be done by the Avonim Gedolos, obviously a layer of paint or plaster is not considered mechika. However, in Shilas Teshuvas Me'il Tzedakah, he argues in this. He says you can't compare these two cases because if you think about it, the way the pasuk in Kisavai says that v'chasafta aleim is kol divrei Torah zois, over there it wasn't written on the stone. It was oisius hachakika. It was carved into the stone. So when it's carved into the stone, even if you plaster it, you put plaster over it, it's not even doing anything to the words. So if it's not doing anything to words, you can't necessarily prove from there that if you have words painted on the wall and you cover it completely, who says that would be the same din? In Shilas Teshuvas Beis Yitzchak, he says another reason you can't compare it to the case of the writing on the stones, even if somebody would come along and say, over there they wrote it on top and they plastered it. That's an exception to the rule. That's what the Torah says. Hashem says, this is what I want you to do. I don't care. In a certain sense, I say, I know there might be problems elsewhere, other times. But this is a direct commandment from Hashem. Hashem says, "V'chasafta oisam al avonim, v'sadata oisam basid." So this is the exception. Hashem allows this type of thing at this particular time. But a standard house, a standard communal place where you have psukim and it's painted, who says you could cover it over? Another Mefarish says, perhaps in Panim Yafes on this pasuk, he actually asked direct on the pasuk, like, why are you saying it's an exception to the rule? How does the Gemara Taka say that they wrote it first and they put the plaster? Why wouldn't that be a problem of Mechikas Hashem? So he says. So one of the Mefarshim explains that perhaps we could say that the Isser of Mechikas Hashem only applies when it's written in Lashon HaKodesh, the way the Shem is written and announced and pronounced in the proper way. Perhaps he could bring a raya that it's not, that in this case, the reason why they didn't transgress any Isser by putting plaster over it, because the name, the Shem Hashem, was written not in Lashon HaKodesh. And therefore, you cannot prove it in a case where somebody has a pasuk written out. In Shalos Teshuvas Rabbi Akiva Eger, he compares this to another similar halacha. There's a case of wax that dripped on a Sefer Torah, Rahman al-Than. And when it dripped on the Sefer Torah, it covered over some letters. And the question is the Sefer Torah non-kosher now? Because the wax over the letters, the covering, is considered as if it's erased. And am I allowed to use the Sefer Torah or not? And the Pasuk explains that you obviously cannot consider this mechika, because if you would consider wax over a letter mechika, if so, how were the Yidden again in the Yarden? How were they able to cover the words of the Torah besid? So obviously, Rabbi Akiva Eger proves from there that a cover over a letter is not considered erasing. However, from the Marsha in Soita, it is proven, like we mentioned before, that it's written that perhaps the way the Yidden wrote the letters Shem Hashem on the Avonim in the Yarden was not in the standard Lashon HaKodesh. So again, there is no proof from that Gemara. So let's summarize this halacha. If you have Shem Hashem, a pasuk with Shem Hashem painted on the wall, we brought different examples to prove. The Panim Me'iris tried to prove from the Gemara that the Gemara says that the Yidden in the Yarden had the Torah written on stone and then put a plaster over it. And I brought many other poskim that say perhaps the two cases are not similar, and you cannot bring a raya from there.